Hi everyone, I'm Ishita Moghe.
I'm Kim Solez, and today we're going to talk about, are we living the technological singularity already? About agency, doing real things in the world, and reimagining the pace of big picture science communication in the era of YouTube and Facebook. So, when we say, do we have agency, this isn't like real estate agency or something. Agency means being able to, affect the world in a big way. And in the past, my experience with that has been that the time it took was very long. When it was based on journal and book publication, like some of the things that I've been involved with in my career, if you look, for instance, at the classification that I created and the subject of borderline changes in the Banff classification, it's been like 27 years that we've been wrestling with that, still not solved it. If you look at my visit to Leonard Cohen and his fascination with borderline changes, so it took 11 years from that conversation that I had with him to the final version of the song Treaty in Leonard Cohen's final album. And even things like, if you hang around with us up in pathology, you'll hear us talking about the controversy about isolated V, whether a single lymphocyte underneath the endothelium in one artery constitutes rejection or it's really meaningless and doesn't mean anything. And we've been arguing about that for 6 years. But the thing about scientific controversy in the past is you knew who said what, you knew who was answering whom. You could kind of, even though the interaction was very slow and clunky and it took a long time for things to happen, you knew what was happening. There wasn't a lot of unseen forces. And it seems to us now like things are much quicker. If you look at something that Ishita and I have been heavily involved in the last year, the mainstreaming of the Human Cell Atlas project. You know that this course is part of that. We've been coming here and talking about that subject in this course, and we were kind of passionate about it because in all major meetings, this very important subject, sort of equal in importance to the Human Genome Project, was simply left out of the meeting. It wasn't in the program anywhere, not even in a minor way. So just think about the timing of this now, the pace of change. So I wrote a message, Blindsided by the Future, which I posted to Facebook and a number of other online social media sources on October 29th, 2017. Complaining about the fact that, for instance, the Human Cell Atlas project was basically ignored by all major scientific meetings. 2 days later, Human Cell Atlas project scientist and nephrologist Benjamin Humphreys was appointed chair of the program committee for the 2018 American Society of Nephrology meeting. We didn't know about that, but that happened. And on March 31st, Ishita and I did a Moghe Solez paradox video in which we talked about this. And then in August of 2018, 5 or 6 months later, suddenly there were promotions for the upcoming American Society of Nephrology meeting, and Aviv Regev, the main spokesperson for the Human Cell Atlas project, was giving a plenary talk. Wow, so exciting. The only thing was, hers was the only plenary talk that had no title. So everybody else's talk had a title, so there was this big promo for the plenary talks with 4 names and 4 pictures and 3 titles. Her talk had no title. And so it was so exciting thinking about how this was going to be handled. We figured at the meeting that she would have a title, and she did, but it was still, it was sort of muted. It really didn't adequately characterize. Like the thing I've been talking with you about is that in every organ, this project will double the number of cell types, right? I mean, it's huge. It changes every story, every biology story anyone ever told about anything always goes back to the characters in the story, right? The cell types. And this was going to at least double them. And so that really didn't come out in the title. It sounded more like a geography lesson somehow, right? But then, Ishita, tell us what was it like to actually hear that talk and to meet Aviv and so on?
So, like Dr. Solez was saying, a lot of the conferences and meetings that we'd been going to that were focused, like they were advertised to be focused on futuristic themes and what's coming in the future of medicine and the new up and coming things that are studies that people are doing around the world. And yet this was the first one, and it was only at the end of October. This was the first meeting when the Human Cell Atlas was even mentioned, and it was this huge talk by Aviv Regev. And we just thought it was interesting how it had taken this long for such a huge topic to even be brought up. And it was also interesting that a lot of these conferences and meetings that had been going on were sponsored by huge tech companies that maybe didn't want to talk about this very much.
Yeah. So what would be the resistance? I don't think it's just industry resistance. It is true that bulk transcriptomics, in other words, taking a big chunk of tissue and looking at average RNA transcript levels as opposed to doing it cell by cell. There are a lot of big companies who are a part of that, and they probably are a little bit afraid of the world changing, so suddenly people are focusing on single cells. But there's another kind of intriguing aspect of this, and that is the word atlas. If you say, well, who has patented the word atlas? Nobody, right? You could make up an atlas tomorrow and, use the word atlas, nothing to keep you from that. So there are other atlases out there. In addition to the Human Cell Atlas project, there's a Human Protein Atlas project, there's the Kidney Atlas project, and I think those people, the people who had the other projects with the word atlas, they were also reluctant to give too much prominence to the Human Cell Atlas project because it is bigger, it seems more important, it has more people in it, and they were probably worried about that. So I think it's not just industry, but probably also other scientists who are pushing to kind of keep this quiet, or keep that phrase out of common scientific parlance. So it was really exciting to see this presentation and to be part of such a historic moment. So now think about this is one of 3 stories I'm going to tell you. And from what I've told you, do you think, did we play any part in that, really? We'll never be sure. I think that's a part of modern life. Like it seems like we probably did. 2 days before, Ben Humphreys was appointed. We sent this widely circulated manifesto kind of thing, and then the video about the paradox was very heavily watched and so on. But there is no proof that those things had anything to do with this plenary talk. And that's similar to the 2 other examples that I'm going to give you, where it's likely we had an influence, but we'll never really know. And I think that's but think of how fast this is, like 2 days, as opposed to, 6 to 27 years, like I was telling you about the way life has been previously. Okay, the second instance. The most famous tech author out there, and if you haven't read his books, then you know people who have read his books, with the 6 levels of separation. Every single one of you knows very well somebody who has read a book recently by Yuval Noah Harari. He is the guy, he's like the guru. As a matter of fact, the online magazine Slate had an article just a couple of days ago saying he is the guru for Silicon Valley. This obscure historian suddenly is the person everybody's listening to. So we were intrigued by, he had an interview and an abstract of his 3rd book. So his first book is Sapiens in 2013. And then Homo Deus in 2014, and then 21 Lessons for the 21st Century in 2018. So there's an abstracted part, and maybe modified part, I don't know, of 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, which he made part of an article in September 15th, 2018. And it indicates something. You remember when Rich Sutton talked here, and he talked about us being succeeded by a superior species, and under what conditions would that be logical that humans would be succeeded by another superior species? He said, if humans get stuck, if they're sort of at an impasse, if they don't seem to be developing. And that's exactly what he's talking about here. What he's saying is the following. In the future, all important decisions in life, you will end up leaving those to sentient machines, because the evidence that they make better decisions than we do will be overwhelming. Just won't be any question. So you want to know who to marry, what to do with your life, all those things that ordinarily would be like your pivotal decision of your life. And you would go to the sentient machine of your choice and ask them what to do. And then, so he said then, therefore, that all human culture is wrecked by this, because every novel, every movie, every play you've ever been to, the plot lines revolve around human decision making. And if humans are not making these pivotal decisions anymore, the whole thing collapses. All of human culture collapses. And so he just sort of says that and goes on, But don't you feel that would not happen, that humans are adaptable? And also, don't you think it takes a lot of technology advancement to get from where we are now, where we are making those decisions, we're deciding who to marry and what to do with our lives and stuff, what your future profession will be, or whether you're part of a class of human beings who is going to spend your entire life in virtual reality, whatever. Those are decisions that we cannot conceive of letting a machine make, right? In the present circumstance, absolutely no way. So there has to be a lot of technological advance before we reach this point that he's positing here, where machines are making all the important decisions. And so that wouldn't be the only thing that happens. What else would happen? Well, would machines get smarter? Yeah, they don't plateau, right? They keep getting smarter, but we also would, right? We presumably have brain implants and other things. So humans are getting smarter, machines are getting smarter. What do we need all that intellect for? I mean, we're doing fine now. Why do we need to be much, much smarter than we are now. Well, think of like when you woke up today or yesterday and thinking of the things you want to do that you'll never be able to do, things you want to have, you'll never be able to have. So imagine if there were multiple instances of you. So it was never a choice of having to do this or that. You could do this and that and more, right? So you could do multiple things. And a culture like that, a human culture of where it's not humans meeting each other, both of them with unfulfilled realities, but humans meeting each other just bursting with this abundance of fulfilled realities. All your dreams, right? You could do everything in your dreams, either in virtual reality or in real life, because presumably virtual reality would be as good as real reality. It would be something you could share with friends and so on, right? So why wouldn't the answer be that humans would adapt, and that if the technology was that much better, our culture would also be much richer than it is today? So I had a poem about this, and I actually got another poet to talk about this multi-threading. Ishita, do you want to give some of your thoughts about multi-threading, or does it seem like it could ever be a real thing to you?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to think about, because a lot of these decisions, I think we already have a lot of things that we simulate and we can follow through decisions on computer programs, and we can assume that going in the future we would also be able to do this with our own lives. So I think it is something that's definitely possible and something that we can explore.
So I wrote a poem about this, but the other cool thing is that there is, I don't know if you know this guy, C.M. Matty. He's a poet in town who does particularly stylized poems. It's an old-fashioned SmithCorona typewriter that nobody has this anymore. You have one, good, okay. So you tell him the subject of the poem you want him to do, and right in front of you, he types it out on the SmithCorona and gives it to you. So this was his multi-threading poem, and you'll see when you see mine that this is a much more empowering multi-threading than what my poem posits. What fantastic tapestries could 100 of me weave? Look, the effects of lives 7 through 30, they have conspired to rebuild the ozone. And here comes 69, that lascivious rake, who has enjoyed and known many of his fair share. But what of 72? He hasn't been around so much. And did you hear of 99? I heard him called the Great One. One soul, 1,000 lives, one city, 10,000 minds. Who's to say we did not dream it all and wake for just a day to a life that still seems small? C.M. Matty. So it pleased me to think, I've been talking about this as 4 to 5 instances of yourself, and here he's talking about at least 100, and it was cool to get somebody else. So here's my poem. Multi-threading is where we're heading, obviously, can't you see? That's what's in the future, what we will use that extra intellect for, so that instead of one life, we can have 4 or more, all concurrent and in the moment. So everything fun and interesting you want to do, you can, even if events are in different places in the same short time span. Multi-boxing and video games is just one small instance of something that in real life will allow us to pounce on every desirable opportunity with characters that are all still us, you see. And at the end of the day, all our diverse facets of personality, can compare notes on the day's accomplishments endlessly. Boy, girl, won't my multiple instances of self have fun, swapping yarns about all the things they've done. And imagine how compatible they will be, since in the end they're all really me. Every day lived with glorious concurrent adventures, and every night with grand stories told by raconteurs. Multiple instances of ourself, and gleeful as Santa's elves. So, then just a few days later, Yuval Noah Harari had an interview in Wired magazine that's also a video. And in that, he doesn't say humanity will be stuck at all. He says it's just a sort of something that we'll figure out, that humans will adapt, that we'll work it out. It's a work in progress, but you know, when this happens, that machines are making all our decisions, we will be able to cope with that and move on in some unique human way, which is exactly what we were saying. So once again, did we cause him to change his mind? But the other thing interesting is that he didn't say, I've changed my mind. He just gave a new interview. And that is also the thing, this idea of not looking back and of sort of just moving forward because the audience doesn't really care. I mean, you can spend time saying, well, you know, the previous talk I gave, I said this and that, but now I've changed my mind. That's just so last century. The audience doesn't want to know that. They just want to know, do you have exciting new ideas that seem relevant to today? Tell us what they are. So it's hard to document that you've influenced something, but maybe it can be influenced fairly quickly. So one of the other intriguing things about this is the idea of what people can accomplish. So, like, I used to do videos by myself, and when Ishita and I started doing them together, the subscriptions on my YouTube channel went up 6-fold, right? So now take that into account and think about this idea. Do you want to say something about this? So in his latest Wired article, he says the following, which doesn't seem to apply to him at all, that individuals can do very little. Therefore, join a group because that's the only way you'll have any impact on anything. So if that was true, then all our video doing would be completely fruitless, I would think. So what do you think about this idea that, you know, individuals can't really accomplish anything in the world in the modern era?
I think I think individuals are more able to accomplish change now than we have in the past, since we do have such modes of communication that we can reach so many people. And like you were saying with these examples, even if we don't directly know that we're actually the people who are driving change, I think being able to contribute and know that lots of people can see what our opinions are, yeah. I think that is a good enough reason to still keep trying to make our voices heard, since it does seem to make change in a lot of situations.
Yeah, like I think the most likely thing is we did have some impact in all three of these examples that we're giving you. But think of the opposite of that. Suppose that we didn't actually in any of the three. It still would be intriguing for many listeners to think that maybe we did, because look at that, you know, coincidence. We have video X and then action Y by this person that we're commenting on in the video. So you just can't be too tied to the old-fashioned documented interaction, because, as I was saying this, there's this idea of never looking back, never like confronting the fact that you're changing your mind, just doing it, you know, and so on. So the third instance has to do with Bertalan Mesko, who is the medical futurist. That's his name. I mean, he sort of patented that phrase, and that's what his website is, the medical futurist. And so in 2017, October 2017, he had a book on the future of medical care, and May 28th, 2018, he had an online article, 5 Reasons Why Artificial Intelligence Won't Replace Physicians, that actually directly contradicted his own book. And he was still promoting both because the book costs money, the online article is free, and I guess, you know, he likes the income. So he never pointed out that the two were in conflict, but they are. And then a little while later, so the online article is May 24th, July 20th, he posted a video supporting these same 5 ideas, 5 reasons why artificial intelligence won't replace physicians. So this is what his book says. I think this is accurate. AI will not replace physicians, but physicians using AI will replace physicians not using AI. But let us examine these 5 reasons in his article here.
So these are the 5 reasons why he states that physicians will not be replaced by AI. So we can go through them, and I think it becomes really clear as we go through them that a lot of them are not true, and very obviously not true. Like thinking about nonlinear thinking or creativity, even with technology from the early 2000s, when we have machines, artificial intelligence machines that can beat chess players, human chess players, and they come up, what was it, AlphaGo. It can come up with moves that humans can't come up with. They're like novel ways to use the board, which we would define as creativity. So saying that AI cannot do nonlinear thinking or can't be empathetic, I think it's a very narrow thinking. It limits the definitions of these words to things that only humans can do, even though there have been instances where machines can display these kind of characteristics just based on the way that it's defined. I feel like these are very limiting reasons and just not true in most cases.
Yeah. And so we directly contradicted the May 24th and July 20th posts in a series of videos. Some of you heard them between August 20th and October 11th. And 11 days later, Bertalan Mesko posted a new video, October 22nd. Very fast-paced, very satisfying, because he kind of answers all your questions very quickly. And suddenly he totally agrees with us. He does not mention that he's changed his mind about things. It's just bang, 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 you know. He's suddenly completely agreeing with us. Now let's examine that a little bit more carefully, because sort of interesting. Now, there is a story about Lot's wife and the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah that's actually in both the Quran and the Bible. It's one of those all-encompassing stories. The character of Lot is in both of those. And you may remember the story of Lot's wife. She was told, don't look back, don't turn around and look back. And she did. She was turned into a pillar of salt, right? So what's the consequence of not looking back in 2018? What might you do if you're not looking back? Well, when you're creating something on the internet, and it has this filler Latin text. It's always the same, like lorem ipsum dolor sit amet. It always starts like that, right? Doesn't mean anything, it's just filler text. The intention is that you would go and put something else there, but he didn't do that. So he posted this thing, answers 20 most pressing questions, and maybe we're one of the pressers, I don't know, about digital health. Video of the week, read more, why it's important. And he has this standard filler text. Now, you would think that, okay, he'll go back and fix that, but I'm telling you he won't, because why should he? I mean, if you're completely forward-looking, you just figure most people, they don't know what that Latin stuff means anyway, and they just skim read, and so probably 99% of the people never realize that you left the Latin there and never put something else there. For those who are interested, the Pillar of Salt, there's a stone formation in Israel that some believe is actually the Pillar of Salt that Lot's wife was turned into, and that's a picture of it right there. So the other thing, of course, when you listen to this fast-paced video that answers all your questions in such a satisfying way and with such reasonable answers, he does not identify the sources of any of those ideas or who stimulated him to change his mind, or the fact that he's changing his mind about anything. Because, that would be so last century. Why would you do that? Because I guess the idea is, and think of this, if you're going to something where you wish to be entertained, does it matter to you that the person always says the same thing? I mean, it might actually seem better to you if the person doesn't always say the same thing, right? If their performance is constantly evolving, right? So, and like, that's kind of the interesting thing about what Ishita and I are doing. We're the only people in the academic world competing with these three people who are professional keynote speakers, whose motivation is like completely different, and so that's what you have here. So taken together, these three examples suggest that our videos are accomplishing major things and have agency. But as I've said, we will never really know, But as we accumulate more instances of this where the coincidence suggests that we are having an impact, it becomes more and more likely that this is a real thing, at least sometimes. And this course is a part of that. I mean, we're doing this video as a part of the course. A lot of these ideas, originated in the course. My life is in, Ishita's activities are heavily oriented around the course. So it has something to do with you. The short time frames, days to weeks, in these effects suggest a new model of science communication. And it's kind of exciting to think you can change things that quickly. And even though there are these unseen forces and it's hard to document exactly what's happening, it's still exciting to think that humanity or human beings are that nimble that we can change. So that's exciting. So the technological singularity, Moore's law, that really impacted on my specialty, pathology, in April 2017 when the FDA approved digital pathology for primary diagnosis. And it was a specific system, one company's system. There will probably be other subsequent approvals of other systems, but it was pretty important that happened. And it brings my life together. I came here as chair of pathology in 1987. And at that time, so there was this recent Congress about digital pathology and artificial intelligence, and one of the key speakers there was Yukako Yagi. And I recruited her to the U of A back in the late 80s, shortly after I came here as chair, because I already had, at that time, had an interest in digital pathology, which you would recognize that digitizing pathologic data, just like digitizing health data in general, is the necessary precondition for applying artificial intelligence. If you don't have digitized data, you can't get there. You can't apply AI. So it's funny, like a lot of people, Yukako Yagi doesn't want to be thought to be an old woman. I mean, we should all respect old women, but she doesn't want to be in that category. And so the idea that I was recruiting her in the late 80s is not terribly appealing. And she suggested that all stories about my recruitment should be set in the year 1999, which would mean that she's been working approximately 20 years. And that's much cooler for a woman to acknowledge that period of time rather than a longer period of time. So the funny thing about pathology, we were the least appealing field in medicine. I mean, our articles were all blood and guts and unappealing stuff, and our videos were bad, with bad lighting, bad sound, bad visuals, everything. When we tried to promote ourselves, we did it all the wrong way, and so students never wanted to go into our specialty. And the funny thing is, since this FDA approval, now there's money from industry, and industry sees a future in laboratory medicine that was never there before. So now we have the best videos and the best promotional material, and suddenly we look like the Hollywood of medicine. Like, why wouldn't everybody want to go into pathology, laboratory medicine? And there's nothing ever off-putting now. All the pictures are beautiful and intriguing and engaging and so on. Gone are the blood and guts, every page. So this is a periodical called The Pathologist.
So a lot of the AI and digital pathology focused articles that are in magazines like The Pathologist, they tend to be corporate sponsored or sometimes corporate written. And a lot of them, when they talk about AI in pathology, they keep reassuring the readers and physicians that their jobs are never going to be at risk. They keep saying things like physicians will always be at the center, at the forefront of the medical decision making. So these are, I mean, pretty self-explanatory. Nobody should feel threatened by advances in computational pathology, and that the collective wisdom generated over many years as a community will be enough to keep physicians and pathologists afloat, even when there's AI that can make better decisions, better analysis of this data.
So these statements are really only true near term. If you think about it, everything that somebody has said to you to kind of reassure you about machines being smarter than we are, well, they'll have to work with us. You know, we created them, so, you know, we're going to, so on, that they're limited and so on. And that the ultimate thing would be some sort of human-machine hybrid, and can't get better than that. But obviously that's just the interim step, right? So you can imagine that a point will come where we kind of get written out of the will because it's not clear that humans really add much. So I direct this course. You know that. Ishita took this course, and so these are the names of the three keynote speakers teaching similar courses, but from the vantage point of a professional keynote speaker. But the other thing that's kind of interesting has to do with the interest of government in this, particularly the government of Finland. Now, Finland isn't a very big country. They're kind of nimble. They can do things quicker. So, you know, China has made a huge investment in AI and is planning to do that for the long term. But Finland wants to be the preeminent country in terms of AI and in terms of embrace of artificial intelligence by their citizens. And so they've created a free AI course, which they encourage all their citizens to take, and really everybody in the world can take it. But the odd thing about it is that so you can start this course wherever you want. You don't have to start at the beginning. You can just go in, and whatever part of the Finnish AI course interests you, you can start taking that part. And you end up finding that there's some very unusual ideas in there. And one is that government can protect you because every self-improvement step of self-improvement AI, self-improving AI requires human help. So like, you know, the machine will say, well, I want to improve myself. And the government will say, well, we'll take this to our committee and ask them. And the human beings will sit around and say, well, do we think? Should we let the machine improve itself or not? And so there's no computer scientist in the world who thinks about self-improving AI that way. Self-improving AI, by definition, doesn't need human help. It's sort of, you know, we create the initial AI, but then it figures out how to get better and better and better on its own. And so this idea that governments can, in a comforting way, handle your entire relationship between you and sentient machines, and you just don't have to worry about a thing. Government will just look after everything by creating committees and stuff. I just don't think there's any evidence for that. It's very interesting how diffused, like, who created this course? You know, who? So, you can ask that, and you can look at these names and so on. It seems to be partly corporate and partly government and partly university. But they had a graduation ceremony September 6th. So we spoke in Spain on September the 8th. And just 2 days before that, they had this graduation ceremony. And guess who was the guest speaker? The president of the country, the president of Finland. So they're invested in this at a very high level. And he basically said the same thing, that, you know, they're going to manage this relationship between sentient AI and human beings. And so a lot of this is about the idea that we will be creating models of the world for sentient machines. But they don't really need models of the world. They can create their own models of the world, and that works pretty well, actually.
So an example of a model of the world, since it's kind of an abstract idea, an example would be in Google Translate. So it's kind of created a meshwork of words and languages, like an architecture that humans can't really understand. And it's like that for a lot of websites and algorithms, things like YouTube, even like Spotify. It has recommendations. It has a language of itself that can't be comprehended by humans. So the fact that there's already these models of the world created by machines and within the machines that we can't understand, I think that kind of shows that a lot of what we're trying to say and trying to control before these things actually happen wouldn't really have an effect, since they're kind of already doing okay by themselves.
So, there are various ways to think about this, but if you look at the downside, the creation of fictional worlds by corporate entities could be something that would turn the tide so that when machines are considerably more in control of the world than we are, that they decide not to accommodate humans, particularly because they find that every story we've been telling about them is just obviously false, that human beings are incapable of telling the truth. And why would you keep around a species that just can't be trusted? So in that sense, it's more than of just trivial importance to think about this idea of truth telling about what the future of AI really is. And probably these fictional worlds will just increase in number and influence. Anyway, this all, what I began with in 1991 at the Banff classification, we had mule deer poking their heads into the meeting room. We're a little bit more advanced and less organic now. So we've come a long way, and I welcome you all to help us transition to the future. Okay, so that's our talk. Are there any questions, comments? Yes?
Why do you think AI can or cannot be empathetic? Or
So,
what do you think? Because you said that.
Yeah. So it depends upon what you mean, but like certain things where you're looking primarily for empathy, like let's say psychotherapy. There are AI psychotherapy programs that are very effective because for humans to get psychotherapy, you have to tell the therapist your secrets and that sort of thing. You may not want to tell another human being that, but somehow it can seem quite safe to tell your deepest secrets to a kind of disembodied machine kind of thing. Might just seem much more acceptable. Anyway, for whatever reason, not only does that work well in 2018, but it's worked well for quite a while, and so that's just one example. You can also think of the expressions of empathy, like the Sony Aibo robotic dog that I brought here. Many of the things that it says seem very empathetic. Now, it's obviously not really feeling them, but it asks me if I'm tired at the end of the day. If it thinks it's done something bad, it'll say, I won't do it again. And it'll ask me if I'm tired. It'll tell me that it loves me. You know, all these sort of things. And it never says anything unkind. So it never says, you jerk, or, well, why did you do that? That's really stupid. So what does that mean? That the setup for simulating empathy has already been pretty good since October 2005, which is when the last production run of those dogs were, right? And if you think of all the possibilities that could, evolve. Now, I have a video where I talk about it will really be something for human beings when the empathy is not simulated but real. And I think you can imagine that that will happen sometime, just like real understanding, you know, like in Jeopardy, if you think of how computers were able to beat the best human players on Jeopardy, it's by doing things that don't require real understanding of the questions. But the next step is where computers really can understand. And just like we're so close to being able to simulate empathy in a really impressive way, it wouldn't be that hard to really make it true that the feeling is actually there. And I think the same is true, like, you know, give another 10, 20 years, there's no reason to think that machines cannot understand. You know, not only can they cope with the world the way that they can now, which is in many ways superior to what humans can do in chess and Jeopardy and Go and many other spheres, but they will eventually be able to understand, and probably understand better than we, and finally understand us better than we understand us. So, you know, if we're worried about human happiness in the future, they will probably know more about human happiness than we will. So, I mean, the outcome of that could be very good. They could presumably make better plans for us than we ourselves could.
But do you think if they can understand us, like, where do you think the human buy-in comes from? Like, do you think that humans will be able to trust AI, or how do you think that you can bridge that gap to actually make humans feel like safe or comfortable with AI?
I think that a lot of the definition of how we are talking about real empathy and real emotion, I think that can be pretty easily changed too. Because if we're talking about, like, if you have a dog or someone, right? If you're having a bad day and he like comes up to you and like cuddles and stuff, like you'd say he has empathy, right? And things like even the dinosaur that Dr. Solez brought in, like, you started to feel kind of like a connection to it, right? If there's this like little thing that's like falling asleep on you and like you're forming a bond with it. And I think that the realness, I think humans are really good at looking past that. Like, even when we saw that block that got stuck in that maze when it was blocked in, we felt bad for it, right? So I think we're pretty forgiving in terms of forming real versus non-real bonds. So I think a lot of the times, even, like, I don't see AI having like a deep understanding of human problems and human cognition, at least for several years. But I don't think that would stop us from forming empathetic connections with them, because even having empathy on the outside, I think that's more than enough for us to connect with them. Since in a lot of situations, even with pets and stuff, at the end of the day, even though they love us, a lot of that love is based on need, and that doesn't stop us, right? So yeah, I think the definition of real understanding, I don't think that would really be a big roadblock in getting us to actually connect and form relationships with them. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of your requirements for a friend, let's say when that friendship starts, like, you're willing to give them the benefit of the doubt in a lot of things. You know, okay, so it's a new friendship. Who knows where this might lead? You know, and it's true, you do seem to have these few little off-putting characteristics, but maybe we'll be able to get over that, you know? So I don't know why this would be any different, that there would be defects in the interaction that the machines were having with human beings, but it would eventually get better, just the same as it does in a friendship that sort of evolves. And maybe if the programming was right, it would be more likely to turn out in a positive way than with, another random human being where you really can't tell, which way it's going to evolve.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah, yeah.
So there's a lot of studies kind of coming to the surface now about how human connection and love almost can lengthen your lifespan more than other things, like exercise or something like that. So they're stressing the importance that humans need love and connection. Do you think that AI will be able to simulate that, or do you think that if I went my whole life and didn't talk to another human but only interacted with AIs, do you think it would impact your lifespan?
Well, the physical attribute that AI has, there's been a lot of work done on for elder care and that sort of thing, what works best. It's like this artificial baby seal and other things, that seem to be highly effective. I think, once again, if the receiving party suspends belief a little bit that this thing that I'm creating a friendship with doesn't have to look exactly like real seal or something. It can be in another category where its purpose is to be my friend, to help me around the house, to help make things easier. And it doesn't really completely matter if I know some parts of it are artificial. It's sort of like when a human being puts on clothing, they're putting on artificial things, right? So there are a lot of people around us who we value in a way that you could imagine that you could come to value a sentient machine in a similar way. And they would probably be more flexible in a way, but that means that, the uncanny valley, what I want to say, that with another human being, the possibility of getting really creeped out is maybe less than it is with a machine that's capable of a whole spectrum of behavior. But you could imagine that over time that behavior would sort of narrow down to what is good for you and so on. And what's good for you would be good for the machine in some sense, so mutually beneficial. Yeah. Other questions? How are we doing for time? We've got 12 minutes.
Yeah. Where do you see corporate investment affecting the progression and development of AI? So you spoke on the digital pathologist and how this is corporately funded, and that's a new area, right?
Well, it's interesting that in AI in general, government investment has been very important. You may know that a few days ago, the U of A was identified as the third-ranked institution in the world for AI. That never would have happened just through corporate sources, but it's like, the government of Canada deciding this is really important and structuring support in that way. And, Google deciding that their main headquarters was in London, but they could have another headquarters here. The things like that. But I'm hopeful that with the right mix of sort of nonprofits, for-profit companies, and government, that things could turn out pretty well. It's not completely without strains, but what really pleased me is when Rich Sutton spoke here this time in this term. I knew all the stuff that's going on with him, and I figured he must be incredibly busy. But he kind of indicated that he's fine, you know. It's nice that I think and everybody else thinks that he's incredibly busy. But like some major things have happened, he has this book, the book on reinforcement AI. He did the first, edition like 20 years ago. And now he's completed the second one, and like all of his parts done, and he's just waiting for the thing to be printed and so on. I think that's a huge relief. So I would say I was quite impressed that it's even working well from the kind of interpersonal, good for the human being kind of sense that is surprising, that you would think that, his life would just be crazy and, the phone would be ringing off the hook or whatever the modern day analogy is. So yes, Gary?
Just a question to ask a little bit more about how you envision the human decision maker interacting with the really excellent advanced algorithm that has proven itself able to make excellent decisions because of all the data it can take in. What do you think the dynamic of that decision would be? Because I mean, as you described it, you sort of thought that we would either voluntarily or be forced to cede the actual decision to the obviously smart machine. But I was imagining that it might still be an advisory, that the algorithm is going to put a suggestion to the physician or whoever, who will then feel they own the decision.
No, I think that in the near term, it will be advisory and it will be hybrid decision making and so on. But then imagine three entities: the physician, the machine that you're interacting with, and a slightly smarter machine, okay? And the physician reaches the point where they can never suggest any improvements over what the machine they're interacting with has suggested as the next step. But when an even smarter machine suggests improvements, the physician can see that that is better, even though they were not able to themselves suggest that. And more experiences like that with those three entities that will gradually suggest that the human doesn't have much of a role if they can never, if you look at a sentient AI and a slightly smarter one, and the fact that we will reach a point where we can never suggest anything better than the suggestion of the less smart AI, but can still see that the outcome's better when so on and so forth, right? So at that point, our leisure time increases, I think, or something, right?
But wouldn't we end up being like naughty children, even though we know the advice is good? We want to stick it to them. I'm wondering how the trust builds up.
So I think that the refusenik, which is a Russian term, the refusenik vibe is always there. Some human beings just don't want to follow orders, and so some people would opt out of the whole thing and want to live without enhancement and so on, and not do what machines say, have their own communities where it's just totally human decision making. But you can imagine that the quality of life of those communities would gradually become less and less good, because they just wouldn't have things that the other machine run communities would have. So I don't have all the answers, but that's kind of how
If we're not that compliant, we humans.
I want to compare that to technologies that already make decisions for us that we just already listen to now. I think that a lot of people at the beginning didn't really trust a lot of answers they got on the internet or Wikipedia and stuff. I know that our teachers would always get mad if we looked up things on Wikipedia. But now I think truth is defined as what Google says, like the first search result on Google. And then even things like if we're looking for a video to watch on Netflix or YouTube, even if I'm feeling rebellious and I don't want to click what's up next that's suggested, I want to scroll down and see something else. At the end of the day, all of those other options are also suggestions. Like they're not just random, right? They are algorithm suggestions, right? So I think that's similar to what would happen in the future, that there will be suggestions. I don't know about this for physicians, since I think that's way more sensitive if we're talking about treating patients. But I think in general, even when we don't want to listen to AI suggestions because we want to make our own decisions and we think we're better than them, I think a lot of what we do already is affected by what AI says, and I think it's just bound to increase as we go along.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. I can watch the suggested YouTube video, or I can do a new search.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's getting better and better. Like, if you use some online resource for something and then decide not to pursue it, you get all these variations of what you're trying to do that are offered to you, and some of them are, intriguing. So, see if that's the same number or a different number.
So I didn't get the punchline. Are we already in the singularity?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. But I have a feeling, even though it's 3 minutes before the end of the 80 minutes, that we should probably bring this to a close so I can answer my page and stuff like that. Anyway, thank you for taking part in this. Thank you very much. Yeah.